Good morning. I'm Connie Foote with Foote Title Group. Welcome to Coffee with Connie this beautiful Thursday morning. Hope you're having an awesome start to your day. I really look forward to talking to you guys so many times during the week, and I really appreciate you tuning in. First, let's get started by saying if you're tuning in and you haven't checked in, please do. I love to know who I'm talking to, and also it helps me tailor messages towards things you might be interested in. So please check in and let me know that you're on just to say hi. I appreciate your time so very much. I realize how valuable it is, particularly in the morning while you're trying to get to work, get your kids off to school. It is so important, I know, to take the time to do those things, and I appreciate your 10-15 minutes worth of time so I can give you some information when you take home ownership to a piece of property, some of the things you might need to know. Good morning, Karen Renner. Thanks for tuning in. One of my loyal fans checks in all the time with me, and I appreciate that. Let me also say, if you're watching the replay, I appreciate you just as much because I realize that you may not have time during the day to check out our broadcast while it's live, and you may need to check in at a later point. So thank you so much for tuning in, those of you that are watching the replay. And let me say, if you found anything that we talk about valuable, please just go down on the left-hand side of your screen and click the share button, because there's so many people that might need the information that we're sharing today that I can't talk to because they're people that you know. So if you found it valuable, more than likely there's someone else out there that needs the information as well. So please, please, please share what you like, and I really appreciate your time. So this morning I wanted to say hi and check in and just talk to you for a few minutes about something that came up recently in our office. That's sometimes how I think about content that maybe we can talk about, because I've been doing title and closings and dealing with homeownership different nuances for about 30 years, and sometimes it gets lost in the part of my brain that I don't really realize what things you might need to know or want to know or want more information on. So this is something that came up in our office earlier this week. We were talking about, me and one of our other team members were talking about a couple that owned some property together that when they purchased it, it was some investment properties they had purchased, but they were not married. And at the time, the lady in the partnership didn't have the finances or the situation where she could actually be part of the borrowing to buy these properties. So what they did was when they went to purchase the properties, he purchased them in his name, got the mortgage on them, and they fixed them up and kept them as investment properties so that they could rent them out and supplement their income. And they had been together for a long time but had not ever been married, so the property would not automatically transfer to her if something happened to him. And they never took the time, as things changed in her financial situation, to transfer the ownership of that property into both of them. So it stayed in just his name for the whole time that they actually owned them. Well, we all think that it will never happen, that the person that we care so much about, whether it's your significant other, your spouse, whether you own something maybe with your children or your parents, you just don't want to think about the fact, and you just are sure that nothing's ever going to happen to the other person. Well, in this particular case, they had several rental properties that they had purchased and fixed up and rented out, and that was basically their income for a while. And well, not their income, but it supplemented their income pretty well. And suddenly he had a heart attack, and 2 days later was gone. And she was never added to the ownership of those properties. And they weren't married, but they had been together forever. I mean, when I say forever, probably 20 years. And unfortunately, he had children not unfortunately he had children, but unfortunately that she was never added to the ownership, and his children were the surviving heirs of that property because he owned it all by himself. So we've talked about estates before and owning property in case someone passes away and how that happens. But what I really want to talk about today is you can't assume that just because you own something with someone for a long time that everybody understands what that person's intent is, the other person's intent is that passes away. Because we all know when someone passes away, all bets are off, things change, people's feelings about how things should go and their understanding about what should have happened totally changes. or maybe just is very different than others. And if it's not written down, just like you wouldn't want to have accumulated things and pass away without a will. You know, I'm not an attorney that can speak to you about estates and wills, but one thing I can tell you is that you want to make sure that your interest, the things that you want to happen if something does tragically happen to you very suddenly, are documented so that everybody who has an ownership interest actually understands that. And so often, particularly now, we see people that have been together for a long time that don't choose to get married, which is absolutely fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I have an opinion either way about it, because everybody's life is different, and what they feel works for them is none of my business or should have an opinion. But what I want to say is make sure that everyone that is in your circle understands what your wishes are, because something very suddenly can happen. We see that all the time, unfortunately. And the interests that are actually there before that person passes are particularly not necessarily reflective of what could happen after the person passes. So in this particular case, we're talking about 6 properties that these two owned together. Well, she thought that they owned together because they had owned them forever. She was not on any of the legal documentation, but they had done everything together, and they had agreed that they were their properties together. Then they supplemented their together income with the rental of those properties. And the second that he passed, she no longer had an ownership interest because they never added her to the ownership. So it's pretty simple to add someone to the ownership of a piece of property. You know, we can help you with preparing a deed that transfers the ownership from one person to 2. You know, this also comes up because I talked to somebody else not long ago, a colleague of mine that I've become friends with, who, similar situation, they didn't buy investment property, but when her and her husband got married, they moved into the house that he had owned previously with his ex-spouse. And the ex-spouse is no longer on the ownership, but the new wife has never been added to the ownership. Now, it's a little bit different because they are married, so when they go through the estate process, she more than likely will retain the ownership. But because they hadn't added her yet, if something was to happen to him, then she's got to go through an estate process while she's grieving and trying to deal with all these other things to ensure that the property that they intended for her to own, if something happened to him, it doesn't have to go through a legal battle with the surviving people that are all grieving. And so we were talking about this kind of thing in a previous broadcast, and she reached out to me and said, hey, I've got this situation, and we talked about it, and we're working on getting it straight for her. But, you know, just because your intentions are a particular way, the only thing that protects and transfers ownership is a deed. So even, let's use the example that you and your spouse happen to part ways and you get divorced, and in the divorce decree it says that the husband retains ownership of the property and the wife absolutely agrees to it, and then the wife goes off and lives her married life, but they never do a deed transferring the ownership. Well, what happens when the husband passes away, or the wife passes away, the ex-spouse passes away? That other person owns that piece of property by themselves. However they took ownership, that deed is the defining factor of who owns that property. And then when you get into the estate process, you're dealing with interests that people may have in a piece of property that could get a little volatile. So my recommendation to you is, when we talk about ownership, there's so many things that go into it, but make sure that if you have a question about how that ownership is set up, let us know, because, you know, there may be nothing that needs to be addressed, but there may be something that needs to be addressed just in case something was to happen. Somebody's life changes, and, you know, let's say that somebody doesn't pass. Let's say, for example, somebody has a stroke or a heart attack and they become incapacitated. Well, that can be another situation where maybe you have to deal with that ownership. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time today, not a big topic, but it does affect your ownership, and you should be thinking about it. Maybe you know somebody who are significant others, don't want to get married, live in the house that he owns, have lived there for 10 years. She has no other home, and if something happens to him and he has children or other people that might have an interest, and maybe they don't get along with her that well, she could potentially be booted out. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that your ownership interest is protected in the way you expect it to be. On both sides of that coin, if you're the person who suddenly was to pass away, you certainly don't want your intentions not to be honored as well. So I just wanted to give you a little information this morning, some things that come across our desk. With that said, I would love it if you have questions, if you share them. You don't have to share them publicly on Facebook. Message me individually. Contact me through my email, Connie@FooteTitleGroup.com. Contact any of our team members. You can go on our website and get all of their contact information. We work in Maryland and Virginia. Anywhere in those states, all of our team members are able to handle any work you need in either of those states, and we would love to help you. One other thing I wanted to point out, I've been talking to you about a webinar that we're doing that we are super excited about, because we're going to talk about the 5 most important things for your home closing. Maybe you don't need to know those, but maybe somebody you do know does. I was getting a little tongue-tied, sorry about that. Please share that information. It's on our social media, on our Foote Title Group Facebook page. It's been on Twitter, it's been on Instagram, it's been on LinkedIn. We've also been emailing out registration information. It's on our website. All you have to do is click the button, fill in your name and email, and boom, you're in. It is November 15th at 7 p.m. That's a Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Why? Because I know so many of you have families, have lives, have work. You get stuck in traffic. We want to do it a little bit later to give you the ample time to be able to get in, because we want it to be interactive. We want you talking to each other, asking questions. It's a perfect forum to send messages individually. So we're going to talk about the 5 most important things you need to know for your home closing. And if you don't have a home that you're purchasing, you may still want to be checking in, because maybe you soon will have a child that'll be purchasing something and you can help them. Because understanding who does your closing, who helps you buy find your piece of property that you want to buy, and who does your mortgage are the 3 most important things you need to know, and pick your associates that you work with wisely. You have the right to choose who does your home closing, and it's so important to make sure that's taken care of, because they protect your home ownership when you walk away from that table with those keys. So thank you so much for your time this morning, tuning in. Good morning, Kathleen. Thanks for tuning in. Good to see you. I hope you guys got some good information. If you have more questions, please reach out to me. And also, if you want some more information that I haven't given you, there's a lot of resources on the resources page of our website, www.FooteTitleGroup.com. So thanks very much for tuning in. Hopefully I get to see you guys again soon, and I look forward to the next time we get to talk. Good morning, my friend, Miss Pam. Hope you're having an awesome morning. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for tuning in with Coffee with Connie. I'll check in with you again. Bye-bye.